I'm waiting for the report like everybody else, but I predict you will see things that you don't even believe, the level of corruption.
When are we going to hear from John Durham? Will there be indictments, sir?
Well, I think the American people expect indictments. I know I expect indictments based on the evidence I've seen.
These people should be indicted. This was the greatest political crime in the history of our country.
This was an attempted overthrow. And I look forward to the Durham report, which is coming out in the not too distant future. And it's an incredible thing that happened, and we're lucky we caught him.
The number one question I get from people is they'll walk up to me and says, when is somebody going to jail?
So far, nobody. It's a report 4 years in the making. The so-called Durham report is out. It's dissected whether the federal investigation into connections between Donald Trump's 2016 campaign and Russia should have been launched in the first place. It was named after John Durham, the special counsel appointed by the Trump administration to, as they put it, investigate the investigators. The report concluded the FBI should never have launched a full investigation and that a preliminary one would have been, quote, sensible. Even those findings are at odds with the previous Justice Department Inspector General investigation that concluded there was sufficient justification to open the inquiry. Despite multiple prosecutions, Durham's probe only secured one conviction, which did not end in any jail time. Alyssa is back with me, along with former Assistant Special Watergate Prosecutor and former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Nick Ackerman. Thank you. You've just been here. You're just going to stay with me all night. But thank you so much for coming, Mr. Ackerman. I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
You know Durham personally.
Yes, I met him once in an investigation where I represented a client in a white-collar matter that was very fact-based and scientific-based.
Is this report those things? Is it fair?
It's just missed. This report does nothing. It is absolutely a big zero. Nothing is new in it. It just regurgitates the right-wing view that this whole investigation was wrong. It reiterates Attorney General Barr's statement after the Mueller report came out that Donald Trump was exonerated. He was not. The investigation was started for absolutely reasonable means. It came out of a meeting between George Papadopoulos, who was Donald Trump's foreign policy advisor, and a diplomat from Australia in the UK, where he told him that he was aware that emails were in Russia's possession and would be coming out during the campaign. At the same time, the FBI knew that the Russians had hacked into the DNC, the Democratic National Committee's servers.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI knew that this had happened, and this connected the Donald Trump campaign directly with that hacking. And then on top of all that, even taking that as the starting point, you had Donald Trump's chief political advisor, Roger Stone, who was dealing with Guccifer 2.0, who was the FSB agent that was actually releasing that information initially, who also, Roger Stone was dealing with Julian Assange, and he was telling people he was dealing with Julian Assange, who was then releasing the information. And then on top of it all, at the end of the day, you actually had proof that there was a Russian connection and a conspiracy, but the problem was the government didn't have sufficient proof to make out a criminal case in a court of law. You had Konstantin Kalimnik, who was meeting with Roger Manafort. Paul Manafort, the campaign manager.
But you had these 9 convictions or people from the Mueller investigation, 9 people who either pleaded guilty or were convicted in some way in connection with the case. But the Mueller report did not say that they were able to find sufficient evidence of a conspiracy to use Russia, that the Trump campaign was trying to use Russia or had used Russia to try to win the 2016 campaign for Donald Trump. So, Alyssa, when you look at this report, it's 300 pages long, so it is no small report. For some on the right, it is being hailed as this is proof that Donald Trump is, innocent of everything and he did nothing wrong. How do you see it?
This is something where 2 things can be true at once. So and I'm full disclosure, only read summations of it at this juncture. there was no smoking gun. There's no, charges being filed based on this. But it does underscore what looks like partisan undermining within the FBI in this investigation that was pushing some of what was early looked into. So the Steele dossier is something that we always come back to when discussing
Right, but that
this,
wasn't really part of this investigation.
Well, it was.
It didn't start it. It really had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it was referenced as part of it. And so I think when people in the public, because just to be clear, 50% of the country sees this one way, 50% sees it a completely different
but you
way.
can't see facts that don't exist. I mean, the FBI was not relying on the Steele dossier to do anything, really. They weren't relying on this other investigation that was into a totally different individual that was hired by the Trump.
And while I do think that is where the facts pan out, I do think it's important that the perception of half the country be addressed in this, which is this notion that there was some sort of partisan working within the FBI and the Department of Justice.
That's just taking fake alternative facts and trying to turn it into something real, which it is not. I mean, at the end of the day, the facts show that, in fact, the campaign manager for Donald Trump was dealing with a Russian agent, was providing him with very granular polling information that the campaign had on key battleground states, all of which Donald Trump won. It was used by the FSB in St. Petersburg to micro-target voters in those states and resulted in Donald Trump winning. The only reason why no one was indicted for that was because Paul Manafort decided he wouldn't cooperate. And the reason he wouldn't cooperate is because Donald Trump told him that to hang in there because he'd be pardoned. And in fact, he was pardoned.
But the problem is we're in a place where there is tremendous distrust in our institutions. And some of this, by the way, largely comes from the right now. Traditionally, it was more the left that would come after, the law enforcement agencies. There's a distrust in the Department of Justice and in the FBI. In this report coming out and saying there may have not been enough to lead to a full-scale investigation, that is going to gin up about 50% of this country to say, see, they did not have enough. They spent, however many years trying to undo the 2016 election. That's not my personal viewpoint on that, but that is how it's being seen. I'm even seeing folks on the right, prominent names saying, defund the FBI, our chief law enforcement agency that deals with human trafficking and domestic terrorism. We have to be able to address this and talk about it because it can tear us apart if we're not.
It's already, I mean, to be fair,
we're
going to have to wrap this up, but to be fair, it has already torn this country apart in many ways. And so, we'll have to sort of, everybody, it's 300 pages. If you want to read it, it's out there. But thank you, Nick Ackerman, for coming on and going through those details. A lot of people have forgotten there's just so many things happening, the Mueller report and what happened with that. And Alyssa, you stay with us, please.